Ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of the inaugural session, I, Snigdha Gautam,
And I, Aditya Raj,
welcome you to the first panel discussion, the title for which is Great Resignation to Great Rebound, Outlook and Strategies. The discussion will be focused on the impact of the phenomena on the shareholders and the strategies for moving from the Great Resignation to the Great Rebound. The moderator for the discussion is Mr. G. Srinivasan, Director, National Insurance Academy, who has already been introduced. Other experts in the panel are Mr. Hitesh Kotak, CEO Munich Re India Branch, Mr. Ankur Kamboj, Entrepreneur and CEO Roadzen, Mr. Vikramjit Singh, CHRO, Bajaj Allianz General Insurance Company, Mr. Dakshina Bhattacharya, CHRO, HDFC Ergo General Insurance Company, and Mr. Deodatta Kurane, Digital HR Evangelist. Before the discussion begins, let me take this opportunity to invite the panelists to form the dais as I introduce them. Mr. Hitesh Kotak started his career with Munich Re in 2014. He is the CEO of India branch since 2017 and is responsible for the business from India and the Indian subcontinent. He joined Munich Re after spending 13 years with the primary insurer, with expertise in product management, bank assurance, international business, and reinsurance, and another 2 years in the automobile industry.
Mr. Ankur Kamboj started his role in marketing at Nestle, and after working in various companies such as Citibank, Samsung Electronics, and Carnation Auto India, he became the regional manager at Mahindra First Choices Services Limited. In 2014, he became the head of networks at Exa Partners. With the insurtech giant Roadzen, he became the chief operational officer in 2015, and under his leadership, Roadzen became the Fortune India Company of the Year 2021.
Mr. Vikramjit Singh is the Chief Human Resource Officer at Bajaj Allianz General Insurance Company. A work experience of about 2 decades and an eventful and rich association with firms like L&T and Vodafone have carved his expertise in HR and strategic business operations. Combining an impeccable academic and professional record, he has handled all areas in HR with special interest in organization transformation, OD interventions, talent management, and leadership capability development.
Ms. Sudakshina Bhattacharya, the Chief Human Resource Officer of HDFC Ergo General Insurance, an experienced HR professional who has a dynamic exposure in all phases of the domain. A co-active coach with a license of International Coaching Federation. She is the honorary vice president at Women Insurance Chamber of Commerce in India and is also the founder of the social interaction platform Compassion Circle.
And Mr. Deodatta Kurane, who has more than 30 years of broad experience in numerous areas of HR, holds a gold medal in industrial relations and welfare from XLRI Jamshedpur. He was the group president, Human Resource Capital Management at Yes Bank before his stint with Evangelist as the digital HR. As the head of HR, he was in charge of creating and carrying out the HR strategy at Bajaj Allianz. Previously employed with Bharat Forge Limited in Pune, he successfully conceived and executed the HR IT system at Bajaj Allianz. With these brief introductions, I now request my colleagues to formally welcome the panelists by presenting a bouquet.
I request the moderator, Mr. G. Srinivasan sir, to kindly commence the discussion. At the end of the discussion, he may also take up some questions from the audience. So the audience may ask their questions in Q&A session.
So, good morning to every one of you, and I welcome all the eminent panelists. But when I looked at the CV of all the panelists, I got stressed. So, I still remember 4 5 years back when I was moderating a panel, I found one of the bright panelists was very, down and looking very tense. So I asked her, she was a lady, and asked her, what's the problem? Normally, when I do panel discussions those days, in my earlier avatar as an industry person, I never used to disclose the questions. So I used to tell them that let's make it very natural, so that, the real things come out. Nobody prepares for any answers. So she said, you're not giving me any questions. I'm stressed. So now I'm finding myself in that situation. The moderator is getting stressed. So very happy to welcome all the panelists who've taken the trouble of coming from various places to be part of this first panel. The theme of the panel, as all of you know, is from great resignation to great rebound, and the outlook and strategies. We had the keynote speaker very eminently talking about the great resignation which happened all over the world, and India is no exception. In fact, I was surprised to hear from him that India had much more intense uh, resignation. So the I mean, for a country like India, which has gone through this pandemic with a lot of problems, we had very serious issues, lot of human lives lost, serious health issues, uh, serious economic issues. We saw, hundreds and thousands of people walking all the way to their native places. Something, we can never forget those scenes. So India has gone through a very serious period of pandemic. Fortunately, we are coming out of it. The Indian economy is also coming out of that, and the insurance sector, with which many of us are related, is also bouncing back, with a lot of growth and also improvement in profitability. So this is the background, and uh, we have CEO of Munich Re India branch and also eminent HR professionals. So we will basically, try to understand this problem, understand how do we really face this, situation, so that uh, the insurance sector or the wider Indian industry is able to handle this problem of, moving from the problem of great resignation to a period where things are getting prosperous, but how do we handle the human resource issues? So this is going to be the theme of this panel. So I'll start with, if I may use the word, Dev, with you. So Dev, can you just bring to all of us what exactly this phenomenon of great resignation? Because I really found it difficult to understand for some time till I was asked to moderate this panel.
Morning, everybody. Thank you. A pleasure to be here with the eminent panelists. And this is a very intriguing sort of title. And, one of the things which I've read about or I've understood is somewhere this great resignation has got equated, at least with a certain section of people who talk about it, with the pandemic. So, somewhere the thought is that this is a phenomena which has been triggered by the pandemic. And obviously, if you look at it from that angle, then when the pandemic gets over, it is expect that there will be a great resettlement or back to normal kind of a thing. So I have a slightly a different view on this, and that view is that assuming that the pandemic had not happened, there were actually a whole host of sociological changes, socio-economic changes which are happening in society, and somewhere it was like a quiet revolution. Some smart people understood the direction of that tsunami which was building up. Some people just took it as a fad and said, okay, this is Gen Z, the restless generation, digital technology, adoption of digital technology, it's a fad, it will go away. So these kind of misconceptions are floating around. Actually, if you ask me, the seeds of the Great Resignation was sown much before, more in the attributes or the kind of aspirations of Gen Z. Okay, irrespective of the pandemic, and I'll just come to that in a minute. So, what happened was that we saw that in society in general, for example, HR, should it play a leading role or a lagging role in terms of setting the direction for the organization? Or should it be that, when you land up in a water scarcity, that you start digging for wells and alternative water sources? I have a feeling that, I'm in company of all eminent HR people. I'm also an HR person. I feel somewhere that HR in particular and management scientists, management thinkers in general, somewhere miss the boat on this one. We fail to gauge what exactly Gen Z is looking for. And not only that, the whole impact of this digital on the society. In my opinion, the human race, irrespective of age, has changed. If our brains MRI was done, 30 years back and today, and if there's a mean to figure out what has changed in our brain, definitely we'll find some evolutionary fingerprint inside there. And on a more physical and maybe at a lighter note, I'm sure one generation from now, people will be walking around with massive thumbs because they are needed to, always operate the. And as a joke, somebody also said that the next generation of people will come with hump necks for looking at WhatsApp messages. But jokes apart, I think this was a kind of a thing which was building up. Expectations from work, uh, my priorities are important. Why should I dance to the tunes of the organization, etc., etc. What happened was that pandemic came at such a time, it just accelerated the whole process, and it had its own real problems. And I think what got accelerated was the fear, personal grief to some people, the great sense of uncertainty, and most importantly, here again, I should not be making a blanket assertion over here, but I think the Great Resignation was triggered primarily because of the irresponsive, you can say, irresponsible reaction of many employers. They just ditched the employees. To put it very bluntly, they ditched the employees. And the ditched employees, because of whatever reasons, as was mentioned, contract employees going home, walking on the road, people losing their jobs, etc., etc. Everybody was pushed into the deep end. And I think the important lesson which came out for everybody was, hey, in spite of all this gloom and doom, you know what, I can still survive. And then if I can survive, then why not I survive on my own terms? So this reflected, in my opinion, in this whole massive rethink about my relation to work, my relationship to my employer, my relationship to my workplace, etc., etc., etc. And to a greater or lesser degree, throughout the world, all economies have faced this great resignation. Some say, for example, that in manufacturing, you cannot have a great resignation because you can't work from home in a factory. But for example, I was reading that in Cambodia and Vietnam, where the sweatshops were there, people quit those jobs and said that we are miserable in our factory. Now at least we'll go home, we'll be with our family, and we'll still be poor. But maybe there is an option over there. So, in a nutshell, I feel, different reasons for different people created this concentrated impact. This is like a revolution from the working class, but a revolution unlike the previous ones, which was not led by a philosophy of communism or the trade union movement which came out of the industrial revolution or so on and so forth, which were very overt kind of industrial actions. This was more of a sociological kind of a reaction. It was something which came from deep within a person, and I think the COVID and its entire environment just merely triggered something which was already in the making. That's my
Thank you.
take on
Thank you, Dave, for very elaborate opening remarks. So it's not something, a pandemic alone which caused this. It's something which was coming, and probably, we didn't really fully understand this. I really don't know the organizers. Why did they ask me to moderate this? Because I've never resigned in my life. So I don't know how is it to resign. So Vikram, So Vikram, I mean, what is your perspective, especially in the Indian context, especially from the insurance sector? Do we really have a great resignation in that sense? Your views?
Sure. So, Mr. Srinivasan, if I were to look at great resignation and Thanks for Dave, and we've been actually representing the same organization. He was much before me there, actually, in that way. So there are 3-4 things before I come to that part in terms of the my personal take is resignation is an outcome, uh, and typically an outcome of exactly what he touched about the socio-economic fabric, which obviously was changing. But actually, pandemic was a catalytic activity which actually happened in between, where due to some personal reasons, so resignations were due to two reasons, basically, broadly, if we were to look at one, where there was a personal flexibility, and a lot of times the talent actually, and especially more the younger talent, actually said that movie Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, there is one life, you better make the most of it. And there was quickly that discussions which happened in the mind of the younger lot. And while there was other lot which was into the middle side, there was a personal requirement at certain times where you needed to relocate, and there were companies which are offering flexibility a little more. There was a movement towards those companies, and that continued till certain time, actually, which is there. So that was another thing. The third thing this started to actually happen was not in 2020. This actually started to happen more in 2021, when the outlook of the organization as well as the P's with the startup actually started to gain much more positive outlook towards what will happen to the industry in the future. See, you can think about resigning, but you need to first think about the opportunity. So opportunity creation started to happen in 2021 more, and people started to be much more open, and therefore this thing happened on the insurance a little more, from that perspective, where those money started to get pumped up, and this Chinese checkers, where the bloodbath starts to happen on one side till, and it follows in terms of the Chinese checkers. Uh, Good from one side in terms of the employees to get that much opportunities, equally on the other side for organizations to obviously look into that. This is creating a wave of obviously a disruption in the business in a certain way, which is, and insurance was no different, because insurance from an India perspective has a very positive outlook which has started to happen in the last 2 years, which we have been all seeing. It's getting even more prominence in the last 3-4 months, 5 months, which is there. And therefore that whole concept of obviously getting more and more players into the market, more and more money into whether aggregators, brokers, or the core production companies or reinsurance coming in, everybody is thinking that there is there. One thing which more pandemic brought in was a different skill set approach, where most of the entrepreneurs actually started to think of, can we have skill set which is a little more new age in terms of the digital side, which is in terms of the experience side, experience of selling in that ways. So whole concept of models changing from experience, and here experience I'm talking about is what, like in US or something, when we talk about is the selling experience itself. The whole concept was actually changing with the technology getting embedded into it, which meant the new skill sets is required. All of this actually started to add up to where the talent had multiple opportunities, the fabric, obviously. Another thing which actually also came into picture was, over a period of time, and maybe you've not resigned over a period of time, is good, is you get established over the employer, and the relationship with the employee was much more than a transactional. These days it's become transactional. Some of the times is where they say, you do it, you get something, otherwise thank you, on both the sides, actually. And when it is both the sides are equally looking at that ways to replace or replenish talent. Equally on the employee side is looking at where on the spreadsheet of the organization and opportunities available they can take up, and therefore all of this actually gets added up to become a phenomena from that perspective. We may see the economies, and the third thing which added up was the economy went really fast rebound, which nobody expected. The V shape which came in on the rebound, at least, if not true, but at least on the in the minds of people, the perception was obviously the V fully. While if we look at the data, it still means that we have to cross 2019 in almost all sectors. But the phenomenon of obviously saying that it went up, that everybody was gungo about doing something new, whether corporates, whether employees, and therefore all of this added up to it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Vikram. I think the kind of new skill sets which people have, and a lot of opportunities for those skill sets. So more opportunities for people to really look at changing jobs. I think also added to the phenomenon of Great Resignation. Hitesh, I come to you. I don't know how many people resigned from Unicry across the world. So, little, I mean, your perspective and a little more global. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. First of all, it's a pleasure to talk about topics other than penetration gap and technical topics, which
That
you are
we are
generally
having next
invited
month.
to. So thanks for inviting and having a business perspective. So I think if you take global perspective on Great Resignation, yes, I mean it originated essentially from the Western world, but to a great extent, I think the insurance or reinsurance sector was not so much impacted by it, primarily because this is a sector which is still showing a lot of growth prospects. This is a sector which still shows a lot of promise because of the new risks emerging, the new areas of topic emerging, and hence the constant supply of talent, which is fueling the future growth. Having said that, I think, and I agree with Vikram and Dev, that pandemic was a trigger which kind of brought to surface few more reasons for the Great Resignation. Earlier the Great Resignation, or the resignation for that matter of fact, was always about monetary or career growth prospects. Now there's an element of work life balance which kind of got added to that dimension, and along with that came a lot of other sociological topics, which I think as industry players we have to recognize, and we have to really factor that in our business strategy. I think no longer colleagues or employees are interested in or organic growth that the sector offered. The solutions have to be now a little bit more pragmatic, little bit more multidimensional, and I think that is where we have to now focus our attention and energies into. Also, the emphasis is now no longer on just career growth opportunities, as I mentioned, but you have to focus a lot on creating self awareness amongst employees, creating experiential based approach where they can discover themselves, where they can become more aware, and then the onus is on the employer to figure out as to how you can energize or channelize their resources and channelize their energy into. Having said that, and I think as the guest speaker also spoke about workforce and workplace, I think the whole dimension of workplace has also changed. But if you ask me, in our world, insurance world, or even in reinsurance world, the workplace still remains a little bit of fluid, because our product category is still not a product category where there's a huge amount of pull. We still need conversation with the end customer to sell. So while virtual methodologies or virtual platforms are good to maintain equilibrium, to maintain existing business relationships, or to kind of do organic, but for any new topics, and I believe that in our world new topics will constantly keep coming, the value of conversation cannot be undermined, and that's where I feel the workplace topic will be, although it's a constant debate even now, but I feel gradually we will have to kind of come back to not the same position as we were, but very close to the same position that we have been. Of course, there's no longer need to report to office at 9:30 in the morning, and all that stuff is obviously a thing of the past. The focus is more on objective based approach, productivity based approach, but at the same time I don't think sitting at home you can do a lot of achieve a lot of things. So to that extent, I think because our category remains conversation dependent, the concept of workplace might undergo a change. The workplace might be at the point of your customer, at the point of your distribution channel, at the point of your corporate client. You need not be in office, but you still need to be there. You cannot achieve a lot of things on Teams or Zoom. So to sum up, I think from a global standpoint and specifically zeroing down on our sector, yes, we have to consider a lot more aspects into employer-employee discussions. It's more about, as I said, HR policy, and pardon me, HR experts, HR policy cannot be now a cast in stone. It's a working document. You have to constantly
Yeah.
revise and review that and we can't just call it a Gen Z or a millennial problem. I think it's a problem which is impacting across all generations. So we'll have to make the HR policy a very living document. You might have to update every month or every week for that matter. Secondly, I think a lot of collaborative approach will be needed. You'll have to get together and bring together a consultative approach as to what should be the HR approach or what should be the work life policy or work policy approach. And I think then the buy-in is much more from the employees to kind of achieve the outcome. Thirdly, I feel a lot of connection will be required, a connection to the purpose of the organization, because younger generation is more inclined towards being committed to a purpose. And if the organization purpose meets individual purpose, then there's a lot more alignment, and then there's a lot more synergy. No longer it's only about pay. Now when I'm doing interviews, final round, I also find a lot of employees are interested to know what is the ESG commitment of the organization. Now this question didn't exist 5-10 years back. Now employees are interested to know what your organization is doing towards governance, what your organization is doing towards environment sustainability. And it comes as a shock. Okay, oh wow, this is also something that people are interested to understand about your organization before joining. So hence I think relating to purpose becomes equally important. And I think lastly, as I said, and I think already has been alluded to, a lot of flexibility will be required across the spectrum of organization to kind of get together a cohesive workforce working for you.
Yeah, thank you. I think you spoke about a lot of things we need to do. Maybe I think we'll take it a little more detail in the next round of discussions. You were talking about work from home. So we were taking classes for our students for last 2 years online. So we could hear dogs barking in the background, cooker whistle coming from the background. So a very interesting, experience for all of us who are used to taking classes. After a very long time, we are having a summit physically. It's a different experience. Now actually we have to adapt ourselves to this physical experience. So Sudakshna, I come to you, with your vast experience in different industries. Now insurance, is it working? Yeah. So what is your view on this great resignation in the Indian context?
So thank you, Mr. Srinivasan, and thank you everyone for having this panel and and inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be with everyone here as a part of the panel. And students, I hope that we are able to capture your attention. The good thing about the theme is that we're already talking about the great rebound. So I would much rather that we talk and focus about what the rebound is. Just to set a little bit of a context, and I think Dave, Vikram, and as well as Tej already talked about that. I think the pandemic kind of brought a lot of things which was simmering earlier, and it gave space and time to people in general to create different pivots for their lives, professional included. So I think when we're talking about prospective candidates or employees wanting to look at what does the organization do beyond just revenue, I think it's become an important consideration, because people are trying to find what can they relate with the employer so that it extends and goes beyond just doing some work and getting paid for it. I think more and more people are looking at meaning. I think Vikram mentioned on a lighter note saying it's like Zindagi na milegi dobara. So it's one life. So if one job, and if I'm making a career, then can I do something which is beyond just doing my job and sticking to it? Can there be an organization which can make it more enjoyable? So I think some of these pivots are shifting. And Hitesh, obviously, from a business perspective, I think you've articulated the HR roadmap pretty clearly. And it's so true that it is a playbook today. I mean, there is nothing like an HR policy or cast in stone. It is a playbook. It is changing. Just to give an example, about a year ago, we launched a flexible work model at HDFC Ergo. And we saw so many things changing around people's expectations around it, and the data shifting almost on a monthly basis. It became like a catch up game for the organization to understand how do we focus on productivity, how do we focus on engagement, how do we focus on stickiness. And since we're talking about resignations, is that a tool like providing flexibility? Do we have a matrix by which we can say that by providing flexibility, it increases stickiness? I think some of these matrices are becoming important from an organization effectiveness perspective. So, great resignation, of course, has caused a lot of stir, a lot of disturbance, a lot of disruption in the industries and the organization, but it's also created a lot more opportunity. And I just want to add on to what Dave mentioned about a lot of employers probably had marginalized employees, and maybe that's what made it simmer. And today, I think the entire dynamics between the employer employee, the talent marketplace has really shifted. And it's no more about just because I'm paying an extra 30% or a 40% or even 100% more as a compensation, it does not guarantee me as an employer that I'm going to get the best talent. So widening, the propositions which can really attract candidates to come into the organization, I think has become an important pivot. And all this talent warfare going around, is it important now? Is it the time for industries to look at increasing the pie? Like for insurance, and I'm sure Vikram will relate to it, and to an extent, maybe Hitesh, you will also. Insurance talent pie is a talent pie increasing? As employers, as leading institutions in the industry, what steps are we taking to really increase the talent pie? Because we keep seeing talent moving. There's a very interesting study, and I'm going to just take 1 minute. Maybe it can also appeal to you all as students. So we looked at a sample size of about 500-600 candidates who had moved across organizations in the industry in the last 4-5 years, and we found that only the price points had gone up by moving from one organization to the other. So, a particular role that I was paying X amount as a compensation suddenly became 3X without anything changing. And hence, I think it's giving rise to this crying need of upskilling, not only from an employer's perspective to create an environment and create an ecosystem which really propels employees to look at reskilling, but also for the employees to take ownership. And I think as students, when you all come on the other side and when all of you join organizations, if there's one thing that I want to leave you all thinking about, is that you must make sure that amongst all other priorities, you also prioritize reskilling, because the world is changing much faster than our rate of response towards it. And I think all of you will feel that extra pressure. And I couldn't have ended what I wanted to say without adding this point. So this is what I would like to say as of now. And if there are other things, thank you so much.
Very important to reskill, upskill, keep learning. I think we have to learn till the end of our lives. So I come to you now, Ankur. As just wanted to understand, is the entrepreneurial spirit, is something, how do you see it in this current context? Why should people go for jobs?
First of all, thank you everyone for inviting, and it's a pleasure to be part of this panel. Very interesting theme, and especially being on the other side of the table, not being privileged as a corporate, as a global company. It was a tough time for everyone across. We operate in India, UK, China, US, European markets, some of the markets. So China got hit first before anyone else. By Feb or mid-Feb, we were kind of ready. What should be our action plan in rest of the world? So we were privileged from that perspective, that we had more insight that how it is hitting, how the work should happen, and like 90% of our clients are insurance clients. They were working throughout. They would expect you to work 24/7 to support them. So we took a conscious call around 2 or 3 things. And as everyone said, that pandemic induced or triggered the kind of resignation across. And people started looking at their own job profiles, whether I'm doing the right thing, whether I'm in the right place, in the right organization stuff. So we took 2-3 calls. No checking out anyone during this period. Be employee friendly, whether someone is a performer, non-performer, because we saw certain peers, certain startups and some big names, and taking an, should not use the word excuse, but probably that's the excuse is the right word, taking an excuse of pandemic and laying off 500 people, right? Because they overhired, they 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 did not grow the vertical for which they hired, and eventually they blamed it on pandemic. We saw that happening in India. We saw that happening in other markets also. So that was one challenge, that will not let anyone go. Support the family, because if you stick with them today, and we are a high growth company, very difficult for us to hire anyone because people don't know much about us. We do a lot of different kind of stuff. So one was that. Second was, when we started observing this over like next 4 to 5 months, how people are operating, uh, continuously engaged from the leadership. It's not, as someone said, it's not just the HR's role, but everyone was engaged with the employees. Few people whom we didn't even interact earlier with, that was the time when we were like talking to them, asking them what's happening with their life. I believe that's kind of one key strength today we have, that people are more connected even during those days. Because if I would have spoken to someone in those days, they would still remember that, yes, you remembered us. We are around 400 plus kind of people team across the globe. Uh, the second piece, around 5 6 months down the line, um, we started identifying, and which everyone is talking about, Gen Z mindset. What do I want to do? People kind of defined their roles themselves, or started defining their role themselves. They said, I'm an individual contributor. Um, I get task assigned. We are a technology company plus the domain also. Uh, More from the tech talent side, they said, oh, I get tickets on Jira. I need to write a code. How does it matter whether I'm sitting here or in the office or at home or somewhere in the mountains? We as a company had a kind of flexible culture from the day one, way back 2015, 2016. No leave policy. That means you can take as many leaves throughout the year, provided the work is happening, provided the work doesn't hamper. So the culture was there, the DNA was there, but it was never ever kind of used aggressively. So we always said, when you're hiring, hire near Delhi, hire near Chennai or Ahmedabad, wherever we have the offices in India. In UK, hire close to Coventry. When this came, it was like it opened up the rebounding factor for us. Now I can hire anywhere, right? And that was an opportunity which we took from people's standpoint. I need a good talent. I need a good guy who can contribute to my long-term vision. And Hitesh, to the right point, people who really understand your vision, who understand what they can contribute. For us, it's very important to make him understand that whatever you're writing, a line of code, is adding some value to either the client, to the customer. People have, in our initial days, people left us because they could not correlate with the value they were creating. They could not correlate. Either they didn't like insurance as an industry, they didn't like automotive as an industry. Somebody said, "Oh, I want to work on consumer healthcare. I want to work on kind of different segment, different product." So that was another. We took this as an opportunity. We said, let's hire people everywhere. Today, our claims head, who's processing probably claims for most of the insurers, is based out of Bangalore. We don't have an office, working from home. My colleague Sandeep here, he comes from a biotech background, but taking care of fleet, logistics, video telematics business, zero background. It's more around the skill, and can you get attached to the vision is more important for us. For us, it's like 50 odd people in your initial growth phase at the leadership level. They are the guys who are going to take the company forward. And that's an approach which we have seen the companies who are working, and most of our clients are large organizations. We work with insurers, reinsurers, etc. And that this is a global company. Yes, I'm working in a global setup. Thanks to NIA, we hired some some underwriters for UK in market through your alumni reach. But that's a factor which we are using on a very continuous basis, that I can hire until and unless it is very core to the market, until and unless it's very core to the skill or the role you want to deploy, right? You want to hire a sales guy, it has to be local, it has to be in person. You want to hire strategy, you want to hire leadership, it has to be in person. But anyone who is an individual contributor can work remotely, and you have better kind of mechanism to monitor that performance. You don't get kind of misuse. That the freedom is something which is very very important for a company, even large corporates. We've seen taking that path, that yes, individual contributors, can I put them purely on remote? So the future is hybrid. You cannot say it's only work from home or only work from office. Even people who chose to initially opt for work from home, after 2 years, everybody kind of gets fed up and they say, can I come to office, operate for like 1 month, get a break from home? And vice versa. People who are like traveling, they say, oh, can I just be at a base for like 20 days? And uh, it's very, very important. Good thing with us is HR is always, the policies are always evolving. It's the people who take the call, what goes into and what kind of culture, and then different kind of teams across geographies. Uh, so that's my view on it. How we should tackle around it.
So thank you. Very, very interesting. So Dev, I come back to you. We heard from other panelists that the youngsters, the Gen Z, looks for purpose in an organization, and people leave even high-paying jobs if they don't find right values, and the company is not really contributing to something broader and wider. So, is this something the companies understand now, and do they really have to focus on giving a purpose to the employees, or they just can be commercial and still survive?
I think the companies who don't read this writing on the wall, they learn it the hard way. Because the fact is that it a lot depends on where your organization is, in terms of its evolution. What is the product you're using? What's the technology you're using? And more importantly, what is the leadership vision? And more specifically, what is the mindset of the HR person there? So, having seen HR 40 years back, I think I've got in that sense, a unique spectator seat, that everything which is happening is always deep roots to what we do. And the HR of the previous years was based on a couple of things which were like sacrosanct. Employee trust was near zero. Okay, uh, secrecy was the watchword, and there was a whole lot of bureaucracy around HR. Right? I'm not saying that was good, or I'm not putting a judgment on it, but that is the way it was. And somewhere, that legacy has still continued and crept, and it's still seen in many organizations. So, in many cases, what happens is the organization has moved ahead several steps because of leadership vision, technology drive, market dynamics, or globalization, or whatever. But somewhere the HR is still stuck in a time warp. They are a couple of years, if not a decade behind, and that's very dangerous. So my point is that somewhere I'll just slightly put it a different way. This is a very interesting phenomena, that most entrepreneurial setup, I mean startups today, you'll find they don't have HR people. So why don't they have HR people? The reason is that, is HR disappeared from those companies? No. I think what they understand is that it is more the business which has to practice HR, rather than a HR practitioner who comes from a different mindset altogether. I think this inability of HR to sort of be with the business, or be as one of the drivers, has caused this problem. The entrepreneurial mindset, the startup mindset, they realize that Gen Z is here to stay, and if they don't understand and they don't leverage the power of Gen Z, then you're missing out on something great. And more importantly, there are various statistics which show that after 2025, 2030, 2040, just as the years go by, the proportion of Gen Z in the workforce is only going to rise. I mean, most of us here, me perhaps leading over here, we are
I'm
out of
with
the
you, sir.
race in that sense. But you are the guys who are going to be there. Now, if the company does not tune to your frequency, right? Then there's a big problem there. The other thing is that we talked about emotional quotient and this, that, and the other. In organizations today, another quotient is being measured is the trust quotient, trust and teamwork quotient. And I think this is something which people are giving a lot of value to. That can I trust in my organization? And as I think somebody mentioned that many organizations they gave up on their employees in these tough times. So as they say, if you cannot be with me in my bad times, you have no business to be with me in my good times. So I think the employees are smart enough. So Gen Z is a phenomena which has come to stay. Last point I was tell you, I was talking to some HR students in another institute, and I mentioned that the very revered and I would say slightly outdated, if I may say so, Maslow's need hierarchy, the Maslow's theory, whether the Maslow's theory has been turned on its head. Because as you mentioned, sir, that somebody comes to you in the entry level interview and says, what is your ESG policy? Okay. Or he says, you ask him, what is your career plan? He says, look, by the age 40, I want to be retired and I want to be pursuing my dreams. What are your dreams? I would like to be in an NGO which is working for climate issues.
Yeah.
Right. So here we were talking about self-actualization at the age of 60 and 70. I mean, you had to be practically wearing robe and booked a hillside for your sannyas. Here you have an entry level person actually saying that, look, I am worried about my self actualization, right? So the point is the whole paradigm has changed. And if we as HR people are not able to recognize it, if organizations, employers are not able to recognize it, I think the audience is very, very clear about what they want. And I think today we should not regard ourselves as employers or organizations. We should look at ourselves in a scenario that we are an opportunity mall. There's an opportunity mall which is opened up, and like we go out shopping in the evening to the mall, the students here or the candidates of tomorrow, they are shopping around for opportunities, and it doesn't matter the fungibility of opportunities. And employers who are smart have realized that you don't really need people from the same background. I think yesterday's Times of India or day before yesterday's Times of India talks about CEOs being now predominantly hired from streams which are not part of their domain. In fact, they're actually benefiting from this. So I think that's the biggest example of an opportunity mall.
Very, very interesting opportunity mall. Vikram, I come to you. See, the other theme we have been hearing is the flexibility. People want flexible working hours. You just monitor my output, not monitor my time. In HR, we always used to see whether the person comes to office in time, see him whether he's physically present. So I think, do you think that the HR needs now have a complete reorientation of their, strategies in dealing with the employees?
No, it's a very good question because I can reflect in 2000.
Yeah, it's working. No?
No,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah.
The question was as difficult in the organization some of the times to change as the microphone also did in that ways. And some of the times the CXOs obviously had different views to it. So 2019, I remember, Mr. Srinivasan, when we actually were thinking about it. So one we changed was both the incoming and the outgoing times. He said we will not monitor. So we were not monitoring. What happened in the COVID and we did something as an organization which was very different because when we were sitting on it, one of the big things, and I think so, which came out in the earlier discussions also, was, and Hitesh and Sudikshna also pointed out, was the whole trust bit of it, and they've also mentioned there's a trust deficit which doesn't allow the flexibility to happen. Trust in terms of trust and our mental filters of obviously believing what we see and what we hear is only the truth. And when it translates to work life, it means that somebody is sitting in front of you. You can see that person and you can hear to that person, which means that that's the only time you recognize that the person is working. During COVID, what we did is we did monthly and quarterly targets for sales as well as non-sales, which were in terms of anybody, if they achieve their targets, they can really zoom their salaries if they want to, if they overachieve, obviously. So every flexibility went into their hands. Equally, the trust came into people's hand, exactly to the output, the manager's hand, in terms of obviously saying people are working. So we have the 100% of the organization for now, last 2.5 years, which actually goes into that. Along with that, we said that flexibility cannot be on one account. Flexibility needs to be an account of capability build. Flexibility needs to be an account of career movement, faster career movements. Flexibility needs to be in account of building for future where they know there is a line of sight. See, for an employee, and if you were to consider when you're into this college, you will be considering how your careers would be. A careers in terms of which you can shape for yourself. A lot of you may think general insurance, life insurance, reinsurance. You may pick up your internship. Some of you may be in the first year, second year. You choose your bets. In organization, and there was an ad long time back of a brand which said, "You don't know what you can do." Most of the organization and they've pointed out even the CEOs are being hired. We said with a safety net, can people move around, take a plunge into a project in a different department, take a call and do it. So what we started to do was we launched an app which actually links our internal IPs of training, which is based on the persona. So it's built like a Netflix of learning. Basically, of your background of education to your role, it has a inbuilt like Amazon or a Netflix a persona for you. We inbuilt on the top of it a layer of our internal trainings, which were IPs. We tied up with Ivy colleges. And the whole concept was when personally I was looking at it, I said, even I look at more my mobile, Google, and WhatsApp than my manuals in the office, actually, which are there on any policy of what's happening around. And Hitesh picked up, even including and globally, you picked up. So people are more aware, even actually, what's happening around. So why on training we don't pick it that up? We said tie up with Ivy colleges. We said everybody wants to learn in a different way. And each one of you as individuals, some of you may like to read articles and learn better. Some of you want to hear to the teachers and learn better. Some of you would want to simulate the environment where, say, suppose certain underwriting has to be done and therefore you do a simulations in that. So each one of us learns in a very different way. Uh, and therefore, can we build up in the capability, that flexibility of people to learn? So we tied up with, again, with Forbes, with TED, because TED provides a AV. We tied up with Ivy colleges, Deloitte, Ernst & Young's, everything, and on an app. And then we tied it up in terms of saying once you do something like a Netflix, it actually propels a certain content to you which you like in the way you would want to consume, and therefore help you in the journey of obviously building your capabilities. And once you build up, we introduce a skill passport. A skill passport is something which gets you a faster visa to the next job. So you build in your skills, you get awarded by mobilities. And if you become the trainer, you get a certain learning wallet extra coins so that you can choose yourself for external trainings. So it builds a culture of flexibility, it builds a culture of ownership. Then we changed something which was there on flexibility, was weekly promotions. Now, no company does it in insurance or most of the other sectors also. We have weekly promotions. So if you're eligible, if you have the right skills, you have been a fast tracker, you can immediately take on to the new opportunity. Every week, if you're eligible, you can take on to it. Doesn't mean that every week you get a promotion. It means that every week you can apply actually to the new jobs, which is there if you're eligible with a certain number of counts in a year. In a year which you can apply. Now, all of this added up, we said with gigs, a lot of time the discussion is around gigs to build a flexibility. And they've pointed out on Gen Z in that ways. We said to build a culture which can support Gen Z on flexibility on gigs, why don't we build an internal gig? And on that internal gigs, what we started was a project economies, which I alluded. So everybody in middle management to above need to do a project of their choice in any other department. And if they do it well, we build it like a partnership firm. If you earn an extra dollar or you save an extra dollar, you get an X percentage of it. Now, here is where we did the first phase in 2021. 2022, we launched it for all levels. Now it's like on a SharePoint, the projects are uploaded. You want to work, say, suppose somebody is in underwriting, wants to work in a sales in a commercial line, institutional, can do it. Somebody is in a retail line, would want to work in a, say, suppose in HR, they can do that, continuing their own job, but adding extra hours of credit into it. And if they turn it around with a set of a team of 3-4 people, you earn for yourself. Equally, you get a flavor of if you want to change, what does it entitle to as a part of the core job. Therefore, the whole flexibility system actually comes into play. And we actually had 10% of our population which we are still continuing as from a flexibility models on whether work from home, part times, whatsoever. So we continuing that bits. We measure their performance are on a quarterly basis as compared to the rest of the organization, because we have everybody whose performance gets measured. They are already on a 5 point rating scale, point 2 extra points than the people in office. Now that helps to actually tell the CXOs and the others in terms of how that difference can be done with people. There are certain jobs which can't be, and I think so you picked it up, Ankur, well in that ways. But there are a lot of jobs, and most of the jobs, if you were to segregate a rule and a judgment part of the rule is where you do the same things again and again based on a rule. You know, if this comes in, this is a job, this is a rule, you press this button and take it ahead. Judgment is where you have to take a unique call, and a lot of time commercial lines have that big time where Hitesh was pointing out, and that's the reason in-person discussion some of the times. But rule base can be built on anywhere, and that's the step we are taking on flexibility further on that side. So thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Vikram. I think, I mean, you could give a very, very nice overview of what your organization is doing on the flexibility side. So, Hitesh, I come to you. You know, this is the point you raised even earlier on the, the skills which are required in a way. In the insurance industry is changing very fast. Those who are there 10 years back, I don't think are obviously fit to be in the industry at this point of time. So, is there a responsibility on the part of the organization to keep their employees continuously upskilled? Yeah.
No, absolutely, sir. I think, and if you see our industry itself, some of the reports still call about fire, marine, miscellaneous, and miscellaneous is now 90% of the business. So, some of the old timers like you and me, sir, would remember that we still categorize our business into that. And I think this is clearly an example of how, as an industry, we have remained behind and not upskilled ourselves or not moved, with the time. And every time I see this report, I laugh. I said, when is this going to change? Anyways, I mean, some things are in our control, some things are not. But clearly, the requirement, and Sudakshin also mentioned that upskilling and new skills are constantly, required for various reasons. One, in our industry, if we take particularly, the risks are changing. I mean, today we clearly cannot not talk about climate change, and what is the impact of climate change. We saw what has happened in Bangalore. We saw what has happened in crop situation a couple of months back with the heat wave. I mean, these were unprecedented things, and if we can't recognize these risks, if we can't design solutions for this risk, if we can't start thinking about these risks, then anyway we will be obsolete. Think about cyber, again another area which we cannot ignore anymore. Earlier, cyber was one small, sublimit in a liability, topic as far as insurance is concerned. Today, if we don't recognize cyber as a separate line of business, we are really not doing, justice to the risk that it bears. So constantly, and this change will be rapid now. It will be much more faster and accelerated than what it was. I mean, motor industry, you take two-wheeler industry, it's rapidly moving towards EV. I mean, in 3 to 4 years, if you don't understand battery, if you don't understand battery risk, you're out of business. And if you still consider yourself to be a good claims manager in a one cylinder stroke, two stroke or four stroke bike, your knowledge is completely obsolete. So every product, every area that we see, the risks are constantly evolving, changing and changing fast. So one is required to keep that in mind. Secondly, the technology, the use of technology, and obviously everybody spoke about it, so I will not repeat. The whole pivot towards digitization has again accelerated, and today we see use of technology in every aspect. I mean, Vikram said in learning, I mean, who would have imagined that for learning and development you're using AI, right? So I'm saying today every job, every role gets easily replaced by AI or technology. Of course, there are people running behind it, no doubt, but you will need people now not to design policies, but to constantly tweak your AI algorithms. So every aspect that you see, whether the risks, I mean, whether you take risks, whether you take digitization, you will have to completely reorient yourself or reinvent yourself in defining how you are able to add value to the new way of doing things. So across the spectrum, we will have to constantly reskill, and it's not only about underwriting, or it's not only about business development. Even you take finance. I mean, today we are talking about IFRS. Now IFRS again completely changes the dimension. Now if you are a finance expert, if you are a finance whiz, and don't do anything about IFRS 17 or the impact of it, you're obsolete. So any aspect that you take, I mean, Vikram has already made me feel that HR is obsolete if you're not doing technology based intervention in an organization as far as learning is concerned. So any aspect of the function you take in an organization, reskilling, upskilling is a constant requirement. And as an employer, you will have to be ahead of 2 to 3 steps ahead of ensuring that your workforce is moving in the right direction. Otherwise you will have to change your workforce, which is not an easy task, in this backdrop of whatever we discussed.
Thank you. Sudakshina, I come to you, see, with so many changes happening, especially in the last 2 years, and, especially as a trend and a directionally, what do you see as the future of the workplaces? Do we, for example, in the insurance industry, do we need offices across the country? Because India today, does a lot of insurance services to all over the world. A lot of claims are settled from India. A lot of actuarial services are given from India. So could insurance companies move to a situation where they really don't need any physical places except, so how do you look at look at the future?
Sure. So I'll try to add on to what has been already said. In my mind, there are three pivots which are going to redefine, and if I also try to connect it to the theme of reimagining HR as a service, what they can do to the organization. The first will be to balance high tech and high touch. So while we focus on what is happening in the tech space and how some of the jobs are going to go away and replaced by AI and ML and stuff like that, but what then needs to be compensated through and by is high touch. So
30 days traveling, manager will come meet you, your team will play a role in your appraisal. So it's not just your manager saying yes, but there are other departments, they'll come work with you in your territory. And I did not know till my resignation there's a 120 pager HR policy book which I was referred to when I resigned. But that's where the engagement I feel is very, very important from a manager perspective. And then you can do at a company level, which is very, very important, which is for the leadership to drill down, re-emphasize the vision or the direction. It may change. It's not that I decided to do something 3 years ago. I started a company, but I'll stick with that idea. You have to be open to change. You have to look at the right opportunity. That what's the right opportunity? Do I have enough kind of skill internally if I want to pivot my direction? One thing which everyone says that AI, ML, do I need more people? Running an AI company, I can assure you, you need more people if you're running an AI company. You may not need to run the process, but you need more people and more data to train those algorithms. So if you're looking at a company taking an approach where you're working in future, which says, oh, I want to use more technology, I want to use more AI ML, rest assured they'll be hiring maybe 500 more people. And that's where your upskilling will become more crucial, because if you're up to the mark of the expectation of that organization, uh, you will be picked up first by the leadership to take up that role. Uh, Another thing from an employee perspective, because you'll soon, maybe in 1-2 years, you'll land in those kind of shoes. Take ownership. Everyone is talking about trust as an issue. It's real issue, but it's upon an individual where you can actually beat that trust, right? Uh, uh, or the trust issue, because if you're performing, if you're taking the ownership, you'll find your peers, your colleague, your age group at the initial level of career who would say it doesn't matter, I did my work, it's only limited to that. It doesn't matter, it's my manager who will look at whatever I've done before it goes to the execution mode. But if you take an extra ownership, put 5%, 10% extra time on a daily basis on taking that ownership, relook at what you've done. Have you actually created a value, or you just complete the process? If you just complete the process, it's business as usual for everyone. If you added that additional 5%, that's gonna kind of make you learn something, put you in eyes of your leadership that yes, this guy is taking some effort on his own. The second thing I would say, upskilling everyone is touched. I also said, keep yourself groomed, uh, not just to the core domain. It's very, very important uh, because your core domain may tomorrow be impacted by any external factor. It can be outsourcing, it can be technology, it can be any other company coming and eating that bunch of peas. If, just giving you a random example, for example, insurance company, you join a health department, tomorrow that company decides, I don't want to do any more health, right? So keep yourself flexible enough, keep some additional kind of skills where you want to upgrade to. Technology is one component which will impact everyone in some manner, whether you're a finance guy, whether you're HR guy, whether you're business or sales guy. Uh, Adopt technology, make yourself, I would say, be ready to learn anything new. Any new tool comes in, and Vikram, you guys are doing a fantastic job. That there's a Netflix for HR in the organization. Use these kind of tools. Very few companies go beyond a certain traditional modules and provide this kind of opportunity. And last one suggestion, personal level, have a hobby, have a passion. You never know, it may become your career in the future. Uh, I During pandemic, I'm taking one more extra minute.
Yeah.
I like one guy. I don't know if you guys on social media like that kind of content, but uh, when 2020 March came in, a lot of social media apps came into the picture. People were consuming a lot of content, right? Relevant, irrelevant. Uh, Companies built algorithms, the content app built algorithms which will throw any content at you. Um, One guy who came from a very poor background was a CNC operator, the lathe machine operator in Italy. Italy was the worst hit after China as a country, lost his job in March 2020. And just to keep himself sane so that I'm free, I lost job, I don't know, what do I do? He started creating dance videos and some comedy in Italian language. Started sending to the friends, and the friends put it on social media, started getting popular. Uh, Maybe another month or down or so, one of kind of the friends suggested that you're only relevant for the Italian audience or people who understand Italian, right? You need to upskill, upgrade. Imagine what he did. He removed any language, he removed any audio. So today he's a guy who gives uh, a comedy content built on normal things in your life, and it's kind of a life hack video. What his domain is, he's the only guy who probably does it, and totally mute. So if I'm drinking this water from this bottle, somebody's doing it in a funny way, he'll show this is to be done in a simple way. Mute, and he's a global celebrity now. Most of people know him, and that's kind of identifying your core strength and be ready to pivot. And because it became his hobby or passion, he started with that. Somebody pushed him, he took a route, but he was in those 5 or 6 months, he was flexible, agile, pick up the right platform, pick up the right way. And if somebody said, oh, you're only relevant for Italian audience, they, I mean, as a normal human being, I would say, oh, should I learn English? Because that's a global language. But he chose a path, no language. Now anyone can understand the content, right? So that's the kind of openness you have to have throughout your career. It's not the beginning of the career, because the more you grow in your path, probably this openness is more required. Because you're not responsible for yourself, you're responsible for the team, the company, the department you lead. And I wish you all the best. Maybe you start your own companies, then it becomes very, very uh, core to your daily uh,
Yeah.
life, that am I doing the right thing to take the company forward, to take the team forward.
Yeah, thank you. I think normally the moderator gets into a stress towards the end of the program. The organizers come back, show signs, the time is out. So, but still, I just would like to ask one quick fire question to all of you. Start with you. So, how do we make insurance as the top career option for the bright students. I mean, all of them are bright, but we took a lot of trouble to bring them. So how do we make insurance? Of course, one is the companies need to pay more salaries, like the banking and financial. The insurers always pay the least. But apart from that, just one or two.
It's a tough question. When we started uh, our company, and like I don't come from insurance background, Rohan doesn't come from insurance background. One thing which we kind of asked question, there was an experience, but like, has anyone from your batch, your college, joined an insurance company? I said no. I asked him the same question. He said no. And we looked at insurance is one industry which is not disrupted by the technology, and it's all about the data, and it's all about the decisioning on the data. And we said AI is the right kind of set, technology is the right kind of stuff which can actually transform the insurance. Uh, so not just the insurance carriers or the reinsurance players, look at the companies for yourself which are operating in this space, which can impact the the world of insurance in near future, right? It can be even uh, an OEM which is saying that, okay, Tesla is saying 30% of my revenue will come from insurance, right? Today, none of you guys would think that can I join an OEM in the insurance department uh, to start my career with. But look at those more opportunities. Uh, it's a beautiful industry. It's a high growth industry. Uh, it's never going to go away. The nature of risk will change uh, uh, with the more technology coming
No,
in.
Ankur, I'm saying they all know this. I'm
Yeah.
just saying in general, how do we get the best to the insurance? You go to your college now, ask them what are your career options. Insurance comes down. I mean, it's a fact.
It comes down.
So how do we, as insurers, I mean, except him, all of us, he was in the insurance industry. How do we make insurance as a very attractive career for the brightest of the students?
So from the
Just
from the company's perspective,
she's
yes,
after me.
yes. So from the company's perspective, I guess we need to build the roles which are more suitable to this generation, be more flexible, and hear their voice to understand what kind of work they want to do.
Thank you, Sudakshina, I think.
So I would say if there are five big rocks to make a decision about joining an industry, which is wealth, career progression, learning, stability, and security. I think insurance ranks at number one when it comes to these five rocks. And not because I'm in the industry, but also because I've worked in other industries and now I'm part of general insurance industry. I can say that this order needs to change, and we, especially some of us who are sitting here, needs to really turn that concept on the head. And for the students, trust me, I mean, having worked for a relatively long time, I can tell you that this industry ticks all these five boxes. And how? So I think that is where I would like to sum up.
Thanks. I would, just simply say we have to be more flexible. I mean, we are now showing flexibility towards customers. Now we need to show flexibility in the workforce and attract the best talent. And I think this is one sector. Just to add what Sudakshina said, learning never stops. So if you want to touch upon various spectrum, right from crop to satellite to AI to machine learning to renewable energy to ESG, this sector covers everything.
Right. Thank you.
So I have a little different views because the problem is while we all think actually it is good, maybe in the larger ecosystem of the Indian context, students don't come in so much for that. The whole reason is one, everybody is smart to look at the land of rising sun and join there. Whichever sector really goes into really high double digit growth, high profits, I can say because having worked in three different sectors before this, telecoms saw that shoot, and while they were paying even lesser, their growth rate were very very high, and then the talent from FMCG and consumer durable shifted very fast to that. So one, very sure the penetration as it increased, and Hitesh said that's the topic he speaks about quite a lot. The government is really working hard on it, and if we see that penetration even going up by 3%, this will be the sector in the coming times, and for sure. Second, the curriculums in most of the colleges is not there even at the grads level, which is there. Now, the good part, because I see my son actually who's getting into 10th, they have financial models which have come in the ninth itself, ninth and 10th. which has become elective. So whether you get a AI or you get a financial models. Now here is where the insurance is starting already. Now here is where the appreciation of the concept of whole insurance will start, and therefore the new generation will come. The third is obviously around the kind of opportunities when it play on the wealth, and because Sudikshna turned a wealth and career both attached to it. Insurance is now starting to get a lot of skill sets, and especially with all aggregators, reinsurance, everybody coming and pooling together, is a new skill sets which equally are required in a lot of other rising sectors. Now here is where again insurance will have a lot of play actually, which is there. And the last one is even the insurance companies are now looking at becoming themselves very, very employee centric. Um, the only issue also which was there earlier in the insurance companies is the profits is still was a problem, and it is a long tail. Lot of times for profits to come in every year to fight in general insurance contracts, and life may be even longer. But now with certain models coming in, we may see in the government intervention some of those things coming up. All of these coming together, and I can personally see at least 5 out of 6 coming together very, very fast. This sector will boom in, and therefore, with government interventions in the curriculums as well as for the penetration to increase, more PE monies to come in, more global players, Indian players, it'll see more rightful upheaval than any other industry in the coming 4 5 years. You are best poised, but even people coming in 3 4 years later also will really be able to add to and make the most of it in the coming times.
Right. Dave, the last word.
So I think the insurance companies have a very powerful tool in their armory, which they're not using on this subject. So that is marketing. We take our marketing to our products and put it to people who so far don't want to buy insurance, and we take the product to those people and we sell a concept. I think some of that marketing skill and vigor and whatever energy, if we put in terms of selling careers in insurance, because there are parts of insurance which are very interesting, but I think students and the job market as such, the overall image is of a very staid conservative industry, but I think that's also changing very rapidly. So my take on that is that we need to use this weapon which we have, namely marketing, and very aggressively sell insurance as a career to potential employees.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I finished in time.
Thank you to the panelists for such interesting insights.
I now request my colleagues to present the memento as a token of gratitude. Thank you once again for this interesting panel discussion.